Okay, everyone. Welcome to my Warhammer for Dummies. Today we're just going to be going over some very basic stuff. Basically just trying to get an overview for a very baseline for what you kind of need to understand Warhammer and kind of what's going on in it. So we'll just be touching on basically just the Imperium for the most part today, and then we'll go into a little bit more in depth on some of the other factions, and more so on the Tyranids, as that's going to be who will be fighting in the game. So I hope you enjoy. Again, it's my very first time kind of doing anything like this, so I hope you guys enjoy. I'm sure there'll be issues, things I can make better, but we're just testing the waters. This has been super fun for me to do. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope that you guys really do and can see the passion definitely that I have for the franchise behind it. So let's get started. So first off, we'll go with what is the Imperium of Man, okay, or what is Warhammer 40k, I should say. So Warhammer 40k started as a tabletop war game made by Games Workshop in the UK. Okay. And it's been going on for a very long time. Started as a tabletop war game and now has transitioned into books, video games, tons and tons of stuff. It's very popular. It's sometimes also known as just the hobby around the world, as how popular it has become. This is strictly Warhammer 40,000. There is also Warhammer Fantasy, however I'm not really as in tuned with that one. So yeah, that's Warhammer 40k, and their tagline, as I'm sure you've probably heard before, is in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. Okay. So they do a lot of the big themes in this is it's very grim dark. There's a lot of gothic imagery, huge gothic cathedrals, big enormous spaceships. Everything is done to an incredibly grandiose and ridiculous scale, and that's kind of the point, right? It's all meant to be ridiculous. Each of these ships you can see on screen, these warships, be up to 8 kilometers long and 1.2 kilometers wide at their widest point. They can employ hundreds of thousands of people on here just to run the ship, some who are born on there and never see the light of day. This is the darkness of the Imperium. It is a massive grinding machine that spans the galaxy. Humanity is the dominant force in the 40k universe, even though they are beset on all sides by the heretic, the mutant, and the alien. So who runs the Imperium? Right, well, let's start there. Since everything is done through the lens of the Imperium of Man. So we have the Emperor of Mankind. Right? He is the de facto ruler of the Imperium, or at least he is the one that is centered around their zealous religion. Right? It's the Emperor of Man. He came in to rule humanity after the Age of Strife, and we're going to talk about that a little bit, so don't worry about that too much. It's not super important to know. We'll basically just talk about what they think of the Dark Age of technology, or Golden Age of technology as it's sometimes referred to, so they might talk about that, but we're not going to touch on the timeline too much. Basically you have to know that the Emperor of Man united humanity on Earth after there was basically the old empire of humanity fell, which was known as the Age of Strife. It was a number of thousands of years where humanity was basically in the darkness. He united old Earth, and then led a great crusade against the stars to kind of unite as many planets as he could using his Adeptus Astartes. Right? That's the Emperor of Mankind. He is now, however, after the Horus Heresy, there's another thing of him, which again we'll go into slightly because it is a little bit important, but just put that aside for now. We're focused on the Emperor of Man. He is now a corpse on the Golden Throne. Right? This is essentially him now, or at least one artwork of him. You've probably seen others too. And he is fed, so for all intents and purposes, he's a living dead. Right? He can never be detached from the throne, and he's kept just barely on the edge of life by the sacrifice of 10,000 psychers every single day. You know, I know I'm throwing a lot of things at you right now, right? We've got the Horus Heresy, Age of Strife, what's a Psyker. We'll go into all that, but right now I really just want to focus on the Emperor of Man, okay? And what's really important, just remember that he is the one who united humanity when it was at its lowest point, and he is the one who sits on the golden throne, okay? And the entire ultra-zealous religion is all based on loyalty to the Emperor, okay? So we have the Emperor, and then we have his Adeptus Astartes. Okay, these are who we'll be playing as in the game. Okay, so here you have one from the Black Templars. You can generally tell, most people can tell what chapter of Astartes they are from based on their armor. Okay, so these guys with the black and white are the Black Templars. Okay, also with the crosses on their pauldrons, this is very Black Templar. Okay, just as an example. So these are the Astartes Space Marines. They make up basically the most elite force of the Imperial military. They are genetically super modified, really tall people, humans, or barely human. They've got 3 lungs, 2 hearts, and in the vastness of the Imperium, even though there may be tens of thousands of Astartes, it is very rare for people to ever see them. Okay, they're also sometimes referred to by the common people as the Emperor's Angels. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about them. Let's kind of really now hone in and focus on them. So here we have what you can see are the Ultramarines. Again, that's that classic blue and gold. These are usually the poster boys for a lot of the promotional art and material used by Games Workshop. Okay, these are the guys we'll be playing as in the game, or the Ultramarines, or the Sons of Guilliman. Okay. Now, the reason that they're called sons, let's go into a little bit about how this works. So the Emperor had 12 children. Okay? And these are not children in the same sense that, like, Emma and I have Daniel. Okay? The Emperor wasn't banging any sweet bitches that we know of. His children were basically test tube babies, essentially. You can think of it that way. He created them. They were grown, and they were called the Primarchs. Okay, so there's 12 of them. And they were all imprinted with DNA from the Emperor. Okay, so they're called the Emperor's sons, or Emperor's children. And then all the Space Marines who fall under each of those Primarchs, so the Ultramarines are under the Primarch Rabute Guilliman, or Sons of Guilliman, because they are done the same way. Once they complete their training, if they survived their training, that is, and they get to become Astartes, and they go through this intensive genetic processing, they have genetics imprinted from them from Guilliman. Okay, so they are Sons of Guilliman, because they are basically genetic offshoots of him. Okay, the Space Marines, usually called, I like to personally call them Astartes. Some people like Space Marines more, I like Astartes more. There were 12 legions of them, and then once you had the Horus Heresy, again, don't worry about that too much, basically it was a bunch of traitors to the Emperor. They split them into chapters. Okay? And the reason they did that was because if any more were to fall to chaos, they didn't want legions of Space Marines to fall into chaos, right? Like tens, if not hundreds of thousands of Space Marines. So they instead broke them up into much smaller chapters, very rarely ever numbering more than 1,000. So it couldn't get out of hand. So here we just have, these are the Dark Angels, the guys in white and green, and then you have here are some Chaos Space Marines, or heretics. Okay? Their armor, the black and gold trim, would make them part of Horus's Legion, the Black Legion. Okay? Again, you don't really have to know that, it's just, you know, so you kind of, just trying to give you a bit of a sense of what's going on here. Okay, so that's the Space Marines. So, you know, just to kind of sum it up really nicely here for you, the Emperor had 12 genetically modified children after him. They were called the Primarchs. Those 12 Primarchs ran each of the Astartes legions before the Horus Heresy, and each of the Space Marines are genetic offshoots of those Primarchs. So Emperor up top, then the Primarchs, then the Space Marines underneath. Okay. Standard Space Marines, you can see here they have the Bolter. They're in the heavily armored ceramite armor, provides everything they need. They've got, they can just speak to basically their suits. They need antibiotics, pain suppressors, bronchodilators, carry more than enough ammo, grenades. It can keep them warm in any cold environment, cold in any hot environment, protects them from any kind of atmospheric or planet side issues, okay, or hazards. That's the word I was looking for. Okay, their bolters, or standard weapons of the Astartes, is what this Astartes is holding here. It's just a bolter rifle. Okay, they fire 50 caliber rounds with an explosive tip. Okay, so basically, even if it grazes, for example, you, it's still going to basically blow your top half off from your bottom half. Because they're so heavily genetically modified, most of them stand 7 to 8 feet tall. They are faster than you, stronger than you, smarter than you. They are the ultimate weapon of the Imperium and the Emperor's gift to mankind. Okay. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about what makes up the bulk of the Imperial military. So the Astartes are the elite soldiers. The bulk of the military is made up by what is called the Astral Militarum, or Imperial Guard. And these are basically soldiers like we know them, okay, today. They go through their training, they're given their gun and their equipment, and they're set off to the front lines. Because there are literally, again, there's ridiculous, because we work in ridiculousness here. There are trillions and trillions of Imperial citizens. There are millions, if not billions, of guardsmen serving in the Imperial military. And because of that, they are more than expendable. Okay, it is usually said that, if a guardsman thinks that he's going to die, then he should throw his weapon backwards towards his allies, because that weapon is more valuable than they are. Okay, the Astral Militarum usually wields las weapons. Okay, as you can see here, we've got the clear distinction. You can see the SpaceMarine here, the Astral Militarum soldiers. You can see the difference just in the armor, right? I mean, the Astral Militarum, again, these are just people. They're just people like you and me. They're not genetically modified. There's nothing really all that special about them. And then here you have some of their tanks that they would operate. Okay, they do work together. Okay, and just because basically the Astral Militarum is expendable, does not mean that their lives are necessarily always 100% wasted. Right? There's a big difference between them not necessarily mattering and wasting their lives. Okay, there is a difference there. I won't go too much into detail about all the specific examples, but they won't just send Imperial Guards in to die en masse. There usually will be an objective that they do want them to legitimately accomplish, but they are cannon fodder, right? If the objective was to fail, it's not the end of the world, usually, right? If you can see Astartes here with them, then generally whatever they're trying to do is at least somewhat important, more important than just sacrificing a whole bunch of guardsmen to it. Okay. There are sects of guardsmen, even within the Astral Militarum. For example, we may potentially run into these guys. They're called the Death Watch, or oh my goodness. You can see I'm like almost kind of nervous doing this because it's just like so exciting, my passion for it. These are the Death Watch of Krieg. Okay, they come specifically from the planet Krieg. These guys are just, what makes them special is they know no fear. They are trained to a true extreme. They always wear these kind of gas masks. It is said that even if a Kriegsman has lost their legs and are still living, they will still crawl towards the enemy to try and beat them to death with whatever they can get their hands on. When they show up, there is business to be done, for sure. Okay. You also, though not necessarily SpaceMarines and not necessarily Guardsmen, you have the Adeptus Sororitas. Okay, they too will wear power armor. They can wield bolters, but they're not as heavily genetically modified as the SpaceMarines, and they are essentially just a fighting force of all females. Okay, all Astartes SpaceMarines are males, as they are genetic offsprings of the Primarchs, or genetic offsprings of the Emperor. Okay, all Adeptus Sororitas are female. So next to the Imperium, we have the Adeptus Mechanicus. Okay, so basically you have the Imperium, which encompasses all like the Astartes, the Astral Militarum, the Adeptus Sororitas, okay, the Administratum, the High Lords of Terra, everything, right, all humans. But then on that offshoot on Mars, you have the tech priests of Mars, or the Adeptus Mechanicus. Okay, they are the only ones who are allowed to worship anything other than the Emperor in the Imperium of Man. Okay, because the Emperor struck a deal with them during his unification wars, okay, and subsequent crusades to reunite humanity, that they were still allowed to worship their machine god. Okay, they were all allowed to operate autonomously, as long as they provided the Imperium with their weapons and their machines of war. Okay? So the Adeptus Mechanicus and their machines, okay, and their forge worlds, which basically create everything, are the only ones who are allowed to worship something else. So they worship, again, like I said, they worship the machine god or the Omnisire, okay, and speak to the spirit of the machine. Okay, so you may hear throughout the game, spirit of this machine, heed my will. Okay, which is, very important in the lore. We won't touch on it too much because you don't need to know too much. But basically, there's the Adeptus Mechanicus, and they make everything for the Imperium. Okay, there is no innovation though. The Imperium is very stagnant. Okay, ever since the Dark Age of technology, which again we're not going to touch on too much. But humanity was so incredibly advanced, and then when everything broke down, there is now almost kind of this fear of technology. So much was lost, so they don't innovate. The Adeptus Mechanicus more maintains and gathers knowledge. Alright, next we're going to talk about the true god machines of war, and I'm going to play you guys just a little bit of clip here so that you can kind of really get a good understanding of just what it is the Mechanicus makes.
Did we feel fear? For you to even ask that, it suggests to me you have never bore witness to such machines, such engines of war. We all saw it, the limitless power. Fear? To call it that is an understatement. Many of us felt, I suppose I have to be truthful to you, don't I? We felt worthless. We'd fought hard for many weeks, but at their sight, all became silent. Without warning, the blast came. The sound was just deafening. And many guard in line were knocked from their feet. Some were even screaming, their bones broken, we guessed, by the shockwave as it passed over. And the heat. It felt like we had promethium just showered onto us. Those who had exposed skin, it was just burned away. Others on the ground, they thought they were on fire. We could see they were not. The light from the blast, the energy, it was so powerful, so bright. You could see through your own hands. What weapon could do that? We looked out and we saw the weapon hit the enemy far off in the distance. We knew we should have felt jubilant, but we were not. Many guardsmen, they were even crying, but in total silence. They were frozen. They were simply overcome, you understand. The sight of such a machine, such a weapon, some of us had heard the rumours, spirits in the ancient machines, you know? None of us thought we should ever see such a machine. A god of war.
So they're talking about the Titans. The Titans are the absolute pinnacle of the Imperial war machine, created by the Adeptus Mechanicus, or I should say they make them, they didn't create them, they weren't the ones to come up with them. They are the god machines of war, right? These things come in when everything else is lost. The pure power that they can generate, they shouldn't even say level, they atomize cities with single shots. These things are truly awe-inspiring. I hope we get to see them in the game, basically, and get to see at least one in action, because that would just be incredible. Really, it's almost kind of hard to find the words to describe just the pure power of these things and what they can do. So hopefully we'll get to see it in game. But just know that these Titans, they end things. Okay? They end whatever fight you're going through. Alright, so that's basically covering the overview of the Imperium and the things we might see in it. Okay, it was a very, very brief overview, but that's kind of what I wanted this first video to be. I'm going to go just a brief overview of some of the other races as well. So here we have the Orcs. Okay, the Orcs are one of the ancient races in the world made by the old ones. Again, we won't get too much really into the lore. I don't want to really confuse or bog you guys down with it. But the Orcs are essentially created... God, hundreds of thousands of years ago probably at this point, and they just live for fighting. They worship the gods Gwok and Mok, and they just love a good bashing. Okay, and that's the orcs. There's really not much more to say I want to go into about them. And here's just some more orcs fighting the Tau. Okay. Tyranids. Okay, here's where we'll stop for today, just for the Tyranids, because that's what we'll be looking at. The Tyranids, also known as the Great Devourer, okay, is who we'll be fighting. They are the most Xenos of Xenos. They are completely biological. Okay, everything about them, even their ships in space, are just big Tyranids. Okay, I'm going to have a whole video on them, but basically what you need to know is they are relentless, a hive mind. They know no fear, and we're going to kill a whole lot of them. So I hope you guys enjoyed this first video. I know it's kind of short, very, very brief, but I hope you enjoyed it. I loved making it, writing the script for it. There's just so much, it's kind of hard to really decide what needs to go into each one and how much. So if it left you a little confused, just try and walk away with the Emperor of Mankind as a corpse emperor on the Golden Throne. He has his Primarchs. Rabute Gilliman is the Primarch of the Ultramarines. We play as the Ultramarines, or Sons of Gilliman. We're fighting the Tyranids. There's Astral Militarum, the Adeptus Mechanicus. They make stuff for the Imperium, Grim Dark Future, and that's pretty much it. Okay, I think that's a good place to stop for now. Yeah, if you're interested, definitely check out the YouTube creator Luton. He's really good to watch. I wouldn't say necessarily don't sit down and watch it, but it's like a podcast while you're working. He goes into in-depth about a lot of stuff. He has a lot of good overview of each of the races if you ever want to just kind of get a better understanding of it. But I'm really, really excited. I hope you guys are too. Warhammer's become a huge passion of mine, especially over the last few months. I've just gotten so hardcore into it. Can't wait to start painting models again. So yeah, I'm super excited to play with you guys. I hope it's going to be a lot of fun.